Dylan.
And I'm Keon.
This is Inevitable, that podcast where we're blacksmiths, because this week we watched Hammer into Anvil.
Written by Roger Woddis.
Directed by Pat Jackson.
And aired on December 1st, 1967.
Nice. Hammer into Anvil. Yeah, you know, the title of this episode, going into this episode, the title of this episode gave me an entirely different perception of what this episode was going to be about than what it was actually about.
Yeah, I didn't remember what the episode was about at all, but once we kind of got into it, I started to remember it a little more. And yeah, Hammer into Anvil is kind of an obtuse title.
Yeah, I mean, it comes from number 2 quoting Wolfgang von Goethe, a German writer and diplomat, apparently.
Well, there's a twist to that that I want to save for the end, but yeah.
Is your twist going to be George Orwell's inversion of the quote?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. We'll get to that later.
Well, the full quote from Goethe, because we don't actually get the full quote, is: "You must either conquer and rule, or serve and lose, suffer or triumph, be the anvil or the hammer."
Yeah, and number 6 is clearly the anvil in most situations. But this is one of his very few wins.
Yeah.
I didn't really find any making of stuff for this. Nothing like real interesting anyway.
I didn't either, which is curious because I don't think Roger Woddis has written for the show before, right?
No, and in fact, I don't even think he was actually a screenwriter. I'm pretty sure he was a poet.
Yeah, I'm just looking at his Wikipedia page. And yeah, it says he was a poet, but he also wrote for television.
Yeah.
But the Wikipedia page says that, like, perhaps the reason for so many classic quotes of literature influencing the plot of the story, and by influencing I mean being like literally part of the story, is because he was a poet. Much of Waddis's writing was openly sympathetic to leftist political causes, including communism. Good to know. Thanks, Wikipedia.
Yeah, so I guess we should just jump right in.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because I couldn't find any production information, which, again, like, another reason why you'd think there'd be something interesting is because Patrick Cargill, who plays number 2, has been in the show before as Thorpe, and, like, you would think we'd be able to find whether or not that was intentional, or whether, like, Patrick McGowan thought he did a really good job in Many Happy Returns, and that's why he brought him back, or if, like, it was just a complete, like, accident, or, like, something, but I couldn't even find anything relating to that at all.
Yeah, neither could I.
So,
this is somewhat behind the scenes, but this is like the one time, I think according to Interact Zone, that we see a prisoner with the number 7 in their number, 73.
Mm-hmm.
That's who the episode opens with, number 73 sitting in a hospital bed.
Yeah, and number 2 just walking in and going, "Why did you slash your wrists, number 73?
Why did you resign?" No. Man, what would be weird is, like, if there was an episode of The Prisoner where number 2 is trying to figure out why someone resigned, but it's not number 6. Like, number 6 is just in the background, just there, in various scenes, but, like, the whole episode revolves around number 2 trying to figure out why someone else resigned.
Yeah, I mean, number 2 is also actually curious about why she slit her wrists, and he goes on this whole line of questioning about, like, was it because her husband, like, had an affair and left her? And I was like, whoa, all right, just throwing us right into it this week.
Well, first she's like, no, like, that's not true. I don't believe that. And number 2 is like, yo, we have, like, photographic evidence, like, it's true, like. So they start torturing her because they want the information.
Except it's not really torture. Number 2 is just heavily questioning her and implying that he's going to do bad things to her if she doesn't answer. He's not waterboarding her yet. He's not using those, quote, enhanced interrogation techniques, unquote.
She starts screaming, and number six hears the scream and goes to figure out what it is. Because as one of the sources I used this week mentions, number six may not trust women, but he does try to like save them or whatever.
What?
God. Remember he had that line in I think it was Dance of the Dead where he goes like never trust a woman or something.
Yeah, yeah. Especially
Yeah.
those of the four-legged variety.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering why number six heard this woman screaming and went running in. Maybe he was just like, only I'm allowed to make women scream, number two. What if that's his whole motivation for this whole episode? It's just it's not number six being some sort of like pariah or dissident. It's actually that he's just being an incredible misogynist because he thinks only he, of all people, is manly enough to make a woman scream, either by yelling at them or in other ways. And he despises number two for doing that.
Wow. Wow.
The great thing about this episode is you absolutely cannot disprove that.
So it's true. That's the one thing we've learned watching these Prisoner episodes is that if you can't prove it's wrong, it's right.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason why 6 different theories we have every week are right every week.
There is like I've this watch through and in previous ones I've thought that it was really weird that number six comes to this random stranger's rescue, or at least tries to, and then does what he does for a person he never even knew, probably. But like, I don't know, I also feel that there's this weird like snide like snicker on behalf of the story itself of like, yeah, you expect sort of, I don't know, this chivalric heroism from this type of show or from these spy shows, so we're doing it. Even though it's dumb and like really odd and feels totally off, we're going for it because we have to, because we're this spy show. And you'll like it.
You'll like it.
So I do feel there's sort of a, I don't know, weird meta like glance here at the audience. I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know. Because what number six does is he doesn't break into the room, he rushes into the room. But it's too late. Number 73 has flung herself out the window and is lying dead on the ground as far as we know.
Kind of have to wonder why number 2 even left the window open. Should have thought about this number 2. Just kind of goes to show how this number 2 is like the most ineffectual number 2 in the entire show so far.
Yeah, he's like the polar opposite of last week's number 2. Number 2 says something. There's a like somewhat of a witty exchange here, but number 6 basically tells number 2 that he's going to regret what he did.
I mean, the exchange is just that quote about the hammer and the anvil, and then number 6 says, "So I assume you're the hammer then."
Yeah, I think
number
that's
2 goes, "Yeah."
a little later, when number 6 is sitting in number 2's office, and he goes, "So you're a professional sadist or whatever," and they have the exchange.
Oh yeah,
about
maybe
the hammer and the anvil, which basically happens right now. Yeah, they do that. I don't remember why 6 is like there with 2.
Yeah, so the other kind of hilarious thing about number 6 saving this girl this episode is that number 6, like every week, is like, "Oh yeah, I'm being subjected to torture and mental games every week. Nah, that's not a problem. But oh, this woman has been subjected to it. Screw number 2. Better take him down." Like he never makes any attempt to do this on his own behalf.
Yeah, or anyone else's, I guess.
Yeah, I wonder what his relationship was with number 73.
Yeah, I never thought about that until now, but maybe he did know number 73 from his previous life as a barber. Maybe he cut her hair. Maybe that was it. Maybe he was her like hair stylist or whatever.
We did get an email. I think it was an email. Hopefully it was an email and not a comment on the website. We got an email where someone like opined that, our theory that he could be a barber actually almost makes sense.
Anyway,
Well, so there's a funeral, right? Or was there a funeral?
what?
No,
I
there's just a
thought.
gravestone.
Yeah, he goes. Yeah, there's no funeral. He just goes to her gravestone, looks at it forlornly.
I watched the movie The Searchers right after this, and that movie is a movie that's about like a guy who's where a woman like gets captured and dies, and he goes on revenge, and like weirdly enough, kind of similar to this. And there was a funeral scene in that, so I'm probably conflating the two.
Yeah, now I can't even remember if he goes to her grave right now or if it was later.
Let's double check the notes. I actually don't think I wrote down when he goes to the grave, so this is probably useless. Yeah, I didn't write it down anywhere.
Anyway, number six starts enacting his plan, which I guess we'll just make fully transparent. He's trying to drive number two crazy, and paint this sort of conspiracy where there is none.
Yeah.
So how he does that first is he goes to the village store, which is now after what was the one where he tried to escape with the shopkeeper.
Many happy returns.
No, because he was totally alone in that one.
Uh,
Oh, it was
sounds
checkmate. It was checkmate.
checkmate.
Yeah.
Yeah, checkmate.
The shop is now manned by a different person, one more sympathetic to the village. So he number six goes in and he does some suspicious stuff with the records. He pretends as if he's noting down differences between six records that should all be the same, which
Yeah.
the shopkeeper reports about snitches, if you will.
Yeah, you know, if this shopkeeper hadn't said this to like number two, like none of this would have happened. Number two probably wouldn't have even cared.
Yeah, and this starts a long chain of number six just doing stuff to mess with number two, and number two taking it completely the wrong way. That I remember liking this episode previous times that I watched it, but this time I was just like, oh my god, like, can this just end, please? Like, this was not one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah, watching it this time, to me, I kind of didn't enjoy it much because I was like, there's no way that number two would be so foolish to fall for some of this, right? And I mean, maybe he's just naturally paranoid and that like exacerbates the problem for him personally, but just like you watch this and you're like, how do you fall for that, dude? Like everyone's telling you that number six is just messing with you, and yet you still insist that he's reporting to someone.
That part of the episode didn't really bother me, I think. Because it just goes to show you how much you can believe the story you're telling yourself when everyone else is telling you a different one. That you.
I guess.
Yeah, but so, I mean, I don't know. That part never really bothered me, but what did kind of bother me was, like, just how drawn out this plan was. Because it's essentially, from where we are in the episode to basically the end, it's number six just pulling pranks on number two. And I don't know, it kind of dragged. Like, yeah, it was just progressively, more weird stuff that number six was trying to do to mess with number two. And yeah, it just got boring after a while.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's just over and over and over the same thing. But we should explain what some of those things are. But before we do that, I want to mention the sign that's displayed in the village store next to the music, and it says "Music begins where words leave off," which was a very interesting quote and reminded me of this. This is basically how musicals work, is that the music starts when the emotion gets too big for just talking, and then the singing starts when the emotion is even bigger, and then the dancing starts when you get too much emotion for even singing, and it's like this escalation. And this sign and the placement of it right next to like where number six does this weird sketchy thing kind of implies that the same thing is happening here, right? That like six wasn't that invested, but once the music starts, that's when six starts really getting invested, and the emotion is heightened, and his plan is in motion now. So
Yeah, I guess. Never really thought of it in that way.
But we also get the weird Pink Panther-esque theme that you
Yeah.
mentioned before in this episode, and I immediately noticed it, and I was like, that's gotta be it, because it sounds almost identical.
Yeah. There's a couple of variations of it too. There's the one that where it's like it's being played on like a big stand-up bass, and there's another version that uses a different instrumentation.
Anyway, number 6 has to pay 2 units for a newspaper.
If I remember back to Free for All, the newspaper was free. You could just rip it off that like reel.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is bull.
This is total nonsense. They've increased the price of the tally ho.
Boycott the tally ho, I say.
I mean, what could they possibly be printing in the newspaper that you couldn't just find out for free from your buddy? Because the only news they get in the village is news of the village.
Yeah. And maybe that's actually displayed in the episode because it's a one sheet newspaper. It's like not folded whatsoever. Or it's folded, but like
There's no other
it's folded.
pages.
Yeah, there's no other pages.
Number 6 just circles the word security, writes a question mark, and then leaves it behind.
And this is enough to spur numbers 2 down a path of paranoia. And yeah, that's it, just paranoia.
Yeah, I mean, really, if you stop to think about it, like, what actually is number 6 doing by doing this? Except just pranking number 2. Like, the other ones, at least number 6 makes some sort of effort to hide his intentions, or he makes it seem like he's reporting to someone. But this, he just leaves the newspaper with the shopkeep. He's like, here you go.
Yeah.
Also, one of the records that the shopkeep flips past, I don't know if you noticed, was the recording of A Midsummer Night's Dream, which we have some personal history with. But anyway.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
What do you mean, unfortunately? That was like where we peaked in high school.
Yeah, but a peak in high school is like a trough anywhere else.
So a trough in high school is a peak anywhere else?
No, it's just a lower trough, hitting even lower depths than you thought possible.
Perhaps we should explain that Keon and I acted in A Midsummer Night's Dream just a couple months before starting Trust Your Doctor, actually. Throwback. Keon was Philostrati, and I was Tom Snout the Tinker.
Really didn't need to explain any of this, but
No, we really didn't, but I did it anyway. We did it anyway. I did it anyway, I should say.
Anyway, the next thing that number 6 does is he places a fake phone call.
My next note is that he says, let's put this into a toaster. But I have no recollection of what this refers to at all.
Can't help there. I have no idea what you're talking about either.
Why did I do that?
Maybe it was just the effects of this episode, driving you off the deep end.
Well, I'm just going to assume number 6 makes some toast.
There is toast later in the episode when we see that sort of slope side cafe. And number 14 is kind of munching on toast.
Yeah.
Speaking of number 14, this number 2 has a sidekick / assistant called number 14, who is basically sort of his yes man, who just does his bidding,
It's like his number
who's
12.
the bronze to his brain. Yeah, exactly.
So, number 6 wastes no time in messing with him too while he's at it.
Yeah, I have a note here. I don't know what this is referring to myself. It's just bruh, number 2. What are you talking about? That's the note. I feel like I skipped forward a lot in my notes because my next note after that is that the supervisor gets relieved, which I think that was a ways into the episode.
Yeah, that was a little ways in because that wasn't until the personal message for number 6, which isn't until after number 2. So number 6 leaves these papers somewhere, and number 2 has them retrieved, and then he hands them to like his chief scientist that every number 2 has, and he asks him to find out what's written on these papers because they appear blank at first glance, and he says, hey, find out what's on these papers. I want to know. Like, do whatever you have to. X-ray, spectroscopy, like, do everything. And the guy comes back, and there's nothing on these papers, number 2. They're literally just blank papers, and number 2's like, impossible. You've got to be working with him. What are you doing? Why are you working with him? You betrayer.
You double-crossing double-crosser. If anyone knows what that's from, please let me know, because I've been saying you double-crossing double-crosser for years without knowing what it's from.
Did you just never try to Google it? Or like...
I guess not.
All right. Okay. Fair enough. Fair play. Why not just use the podcast as your own personal Google feed? All right. Sure. Why not? So anyway, yeah, number 6 is just really messing with number 2 now because he goes to sleep. He writes this note. He puts it under his pillow, and he's like, "All right, sweet dreams, number 6, myself, sweet dreams." And number 2 steals it, and it says like XO4, number 2's instability confirmed, detailed report to follow. And number 2 is like, clearly he's a plant.
Yeah, so this is where we get the big twist of the series, which is that number 6 has actually been working for the Village the entire time, and that this entire show was actually just a test for the number 2s, and that they've all failed because they all get, replaced every week. Best kept secret about the Prisoner. Most people who watch this show are in on the joke and don't tell newcomers, but yeah, here we are. No.
We kind of touched on this when we theorized that like maybe number 6 even is a when I proposed the theory that the numbers applied not just to the people but also to like the job that they were assigned, and how number 6 is always trying to escape, and that kind of plays into this, like, with him testing number 2, like he's just fulfilling his duty in the Village.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, so number 6 decides to broadcast a message over the Village radio message broadcasting thing that we've never heard of before and we'll never hear of again.
He just pretends it's from someone else. I know. Well, no, they used it. They used it to announce speed learn in the general, to announce that the class for the speed learn was happening, but right?
I think in that case, I don't think it was like you could send in your message and have it played over the radio.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's
just
true.
Like, yeah.
Fair enough. But I mean, number 6 pretends that the message isn't from him, just that it's for him.
Yeah, he goes to the graveyard. I think he sees number 73's grave, but he also like checks some other graves, and he uses one of the numbers from one of the graves, like 113 or something like that.
Yeah.
Which drives number 2 even more off the deep end because he realizes that it's from someone who doesn't exist, someone who's already dead, which makes sense because, as we learned in Dance of the Dead, number 6 is already dead. So
wow.
Really this should put number 2 at ease.
Wow. Devastating revelations here on Trust Your Doctor.
But no, number 2 goes on sort of a tirade in the surveillance room, and he fires the supervisor. The
supervisor we've had like since the start of the show.
Yeah. He looks really upset about it too. He's like, wait, what?
Yeah, because he looked like, out of all the people in the Village, he took pride in the work he did there.
Oh my God.
He looked like he felt like he had job security too.
Yeah, I don't really know what the supervisor's role is, but apparently part of it is announcing the things over the radio.
I mean, it seems like he directs Rover / the Guardians.
Mm-hmm.
Just doing double duty. I guess he monitors all the weird surveillance
Yeah.
feeds they have chilling everywhere in the village.
Yeah.
So I guess that's his job. Anyway, number 2 just points at a random guy in the room and goes, you're the supervisor now. Hasn't been trained,
Yeah.
has no idea what his responsibilities are, but he just this is his job now.
This is my life now.
I mean, he kind of looks like he doesn't want to take the job, but he also knows that if he says no, he's going to be like executed or exiled, so he just does it.
Yeah. Number 2 also gets real suspicious of number 14 and orders him out. And number 14 comes across number 6 and he's like, you did
Yeah,
this.
because
You jerk. He doesn't come across. He he enters number 6's house.
yeah, the reason that 2 gets upset at 14 is because 14 reports to number 2 that number 6 came up to him at like a restaurant and started talking to him and then like left, and he reported everything that he said to number 2, and he's like, you were in on it. Like the waiter said you guys were whispering, and number 14 just goes, well, he was, but I wasn't. And number 2's just like, you're working with him. You get out of here. You're fired.
Right, which prompts number 14 to confront number 6 in his house, and they have this sort of fight set to whatever music it was that number 6 was listening to.
I guess
some classical music.
He too liked his job and didn't want to get fired.
Yeah. Did we skip the scene where they have a Kosho match?
Yes. We did
is
skip
that later?
that,
Yeah,
that's
so
before 14 gets fired.
yeah, they actually fight one other time. They play. I don't know if you'd use the word play for this, but it's Kosho, the fictional martial art from the Prisoner.
Great.
That shows up again. It shows up again later. In what capacity, I have no idea, because again, I have no like recollection of the next like 3 or 4 episodes.
It shows up later in an episode that was
basically
written and produced before this one, so they probably invented it for that episode and then used it in this episode, but then when they aired them in the other order, it shows up in the other episode. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah, which is why it has absolutely no explanation here. It's just like Kosho, and then they go right into it. Basically, it's I guess it's like hand-to-hand combat, but it's on trampolines above like a pool of water. And there's also like a little ledge area that you can hang on to.
Yeah, seems not safe. But I guess everything about the village seems not safe.
Also, that hard, like, protective equipment they're wearing seems like if you really hit your head hard against something would give you a concussion rather than, like, soften the blow. So, I don't know, it just looked as if they were wearing hard helmets with no padding whatsoever.
They probably were, but really, like, honestly, they probably were.
Yeah. Anyway, that match gets interrupted by, like, 2 other people who are waiting in line for their turn.
I guess they only have one Kosho arena in the village.
Yeah. This was the other, when I alluded to the recreation center coming back again from Schizoid Man, this is what I was talking about. This is what
you were referring to, the Kosho arena?
Yes. Anyway, this scene is why the fight between number 6 and number 14 later is actually a rematch, is actually the second coming, is actually the second time around, the revenge match, so to speak. One of them gets flung through a window. I think it was 14. Actually, it was 14 because that's how it all ends.
6 decides to play even more pranks by just like he captures a pigeon and then attaches a note to its foot and then just lets it go.
Yeah, he's real lucky that it was a pigeon that went in that trap that he set up. It could have just been like a rat.
Or a bunny. Or like...
Yeah.
Speaking of bunnies, I was informed that like the bunnies where we are, Keon, there's like a strain of bunny Ebola going through them. Like there's a bunny plague where we live right now.
Huh.
But yeah, imagine if 6 just captured like an eagle or something.
captures like an endangered species, the last of its kind. What if he captured like, I don't know, like a lizard, and like he tried to send it on its way, but it just like it didn't go anywhere.
It just runs into a bush and then like runs into the street and immediately gets run over by the security van.
Anyway, number two's reaction to this, to the bird flying off, is to employ the village like laser cannon thing.
Yeah, we talk about how the only sci-fi thing in the Prisoner is rover, and I'm like, but what about this freaking laser cannon? They clearly just stored inside the flagpole for 10 weeks.
That's also apparently non-lethal because the bird is alive and well when they capture it.
Yeah, it just knocks it out, you know? It's a knockout cannon. Just a prank, bro. Just a prank, Pigeon. Pranked you.
Number two opens the message, and I think this might have been one of the other like dozen messages that Six writes this episode, but if I remember correctly, this one's just a random string of numbers.
Yeah, as far as I can remember, this one's just like it's just complete nonsense that don't mean anything.
Writes out gotcha using the periodic table.
Pranked you.
While all this is going on, we forgot to mention number two has like got a cuckoo clock, and number six, and number two thinks it's a bomb. So they get the bomb disposal unit on it, and yeah,
because number six. Well, okay, number six is not doing anything to dissuade anyone from thinking it's a bomb because he just plants it like right outside the control room building, and then leaves. So, but again, there's nothing. It's a nothing. It's not a bomb. It's a nothing.
Eventually, so we actually kind of explain this out of order. This is actually the point in the episode where number two gets paranoid enough to fire number 14, and he actually also fires the butler.
The butler seems unfazed by this and doesn't actually even leave the job. He actually then continues to do his job for the rest of the episode anyway.
Really, I thought there was at least some amount of like facial acting on the part of Angelo Musca, or however you pronounce his name. He seemed a little bit upset about it, at least, I thought.
Maybe. I got the impression that he wasn't fazed and just continued to do his job for the rest of the episode.
Yeah, perhaps implying that the butler is even higher up than number two.
Oh yeah, I mean, I always got that impression that the butler has a lot more power than everyone seems to acknowledge.
Yeah, he's almost, not exactly, but he almost is kind of like the Shakespearean, or, you know, like, fool type character who, like, appears to be inconsequential and kind of just there and comic relief, although the butler's not comic relief, but, like, actually is more in charge and has a better outlook on, you know, the situation than any of the other characters.
Right.
It's kind of in the same vein. Not exactly, but yeah.
I mean, the butler is the only, like, omnipresent character, really, right? Like...
Yeah, it was even... I know we mentioned it. I think it was last week, or it was one of the recent episodes. In his character briefing, he was called out as the only character other than number 6 who appears in every episode, and a potential candidate for number 1.
Yeah, I mean, and I was going to say for this week... Just jumping a little bit ahead, like I was going to say my Who is Number 1 segment for this week was going to be the butler, but that's getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, so this is where they have the fight that we explained earlier. And after that's over and done with, number 6 just... Oh, and we should mention the sort of straw that broke the camel's back on firing number 14 and the butler was that number 6 just shows up at the Green Dome and he's like, so what do you want, number 2? And number 2's like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, you called me here, right? He's like, no. He's like, well, I got a call in your voice.
Suspicious.
Yeah. Anyway, number 2 is like, looks like he's about to eat the bike. Because he's kind of just, I don't know. I don't even know. He's like hugging it. and he like has one of the handlebars like very close to his mouth. And he calls out number 6. He's like, "You're not number 6, you're number D6, and you're working with XO4 against me."
Yeah, I mean, that's what number 6 wrote in his original message, and it was probably complete nonsense on number 6's part. So this just shows that number 2 is like convinced himself of the truth here.
Right. But luckily for him, it all turns out to be true. And no. Number 6 tells him that he's failed, that he's interfered in the village's plans, and that he's paranoid and he needs to resign.
He needs to be replaced, I think he says. And number 2 says, well, who's going to report me to be replaced? You? And number 6 goes, no, you are.
And that happens. Number 2 picks up the red phone and turns himself in.
R.I.P.
Gotcha.
So this made me realize that maybe, well, if it wasn't free for all when number 2 says, like, we're democratic and we elect once a year or whatever, might still be true, but there's just like a mechanism in place where somebody reports on number 2 and they get replaced, and that replacement is not a democratic process, but that like in general there is a yearly election that does elect a new number 2, but there is also a mechanism in place to replace number 2 non-democratically.
Yeah, kind of like how if the president dies, like the vice president just becomes president. It's like there's not like another election.
Yeah.
Type thing, yeah.
Unless you don't have a vice president, then things get weird.
That's how it ends. And there was something weird I noticed in the credits, and I couldn't tell if this was just my imagination, but at the end of this episode's end credits, the body of the bike disappears. So like you still see the wheels, but like the metal frame of the bike that is constructed over the course of the credits disappears. And I couldn't remember if that was in every episode or if it was just this one. I want to say it's just this one.
Yeah, I would want to say that as well, because I don't remember it happening in the other episodes.
Yeah, so bit of a symbolism there for you.
When the episode still, though, ends with number 6's face being slammed behind bars.
Yeah, this is probably chronologically one of the later episodes, and just goes to show you how much they've actually broken number 6, because his plan has nothing to do with escaping this episode. He doesn't even try to escape the village. He doesn't use the opportunity that number 2, being paranoid and self-absorbed, might present to him. He just keeps going on with his plan and at the end stays in the village. In fact, reasserting village control by replacing the one number 2 who might slip up and allow him to escape.
Yeah, I mean...
So he's really more of a prisoner than ever. Yeah, sorry.
No, I'm still trying to like formulate the thought that I've got into like a coherent sentence, but you have to wonder if like in some ways if this really is even a win for number 6, because it is, he wins because he beats number 2, but he probably puts in place, he just, like you said, reasserts village control by replacing number 2 with a less ineffectual number 2. Which is the same argument that could be made for the end of the general, but I think this one is more clear-cut that he actually like does win. I do wonder like how much of that is him playing into his role in the village as the guy who tries to escape and then reasserts or re-implements even village control, because number 2 seems to like have rapidly lost control of the situation.
Right. And we get like those newspaper shots or whatever of like number 2 increases vigilance in the village or whatever, but behind the scenes we see that he fires the supervisor, brings on some other random person as the supervisor. Like number 6, this episode like presents basically one of number 6's best chances of escaping probably, but he doesn't take it.
Yeah. Number 6, you could totally just leave right now. In the the transition period, you could just bugger off and no one would even know. But oh well. Oh well.
I still did have this as a win for number 6. At the end of the day, I kind of weighed it. I weighed win against loss, and I put it down as a win. I don't know if
I agree.
but
I do think this is a win for number 6. Like, he definitely... I mean, he succeeds. Like, it's kind of hard to argue that he didn't succeed. You could... Like I argued a little bit ago, you could argue that maybe that he is winning in such that he's reasserting village control, but he still wins, so...
Mm-hmm. As for who number 1 is this week, I actually had number 6 as being number 1, since he's in total control of the situation, pretty much.
Yeah. I can definitely see that. I was going to say the butler, if only because I'm trying to avoid making number 6 number 1, because it always begs the question, why would number 6 need to know who number 1 is? But I could definitely see that number 6 is the one in control this week. And, could be number 1.
Yeah, there's definitely a focus on the butler, too, in this episode, more so than most. Kind of calling into question, for the first time, like, if we hadn't been... And I want to say, I might just be making this up, but I want to say that was my reaction my first time watching through the show, is like not really even paying attention to the butler. And then when this episode hits, just being like, whoa, yeah, like there's this butler guy who's in every episode.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason why I even processed that he was in every episode is because of our Britain's 10 Actors segment, where, every week we look at IMDb and there he is, Angelo, however you say, Muscat or Muscat or whatever, in every episode.
Yeah. Yeah, he definitely flies under the radar if you're not looking stuff up and actively discussing it. Until this episode, I guess.
Classic.
Anyway, there's some other actors in this episode as well. I know we haven't really discussed on some of the topics we wanted to hit on, but that was just too good of a transition to pass up.
All right, we'll talk about the actors.
All right, I'll just start.
You can start.
Yeah, since we're actually somehow keeping track of who started when now, both in this podcast and with Trust Your Doctor, a Doctor Who podcast. Check that out in the same continuum.
In the same continuum?
Yeah, well, it was like, because we just recorded Trust Your Doctor, and you took the lead on this segment there, so this is sort of part of that, I guess. I don't know.
Perhaps.
Anyway, we have Patrick Cargill as number 2, again, who played Thorpe in Many Happy Returns. Or, yeah, it was Many Happy Returns. Yeah, yep. Okay. He's been in a ton of stuff. He played a version of the Mad Hatter in an Alice in Wonderland from the 50s, I think. He was in Dixon of Dock Green, he was in The Avengers, and then like a ton of other stuff that I didn't recognize. Not that I recognize Dixon of Dock Green, other than the name. I don't really know what that show is. I've just seen it a ton.
Well, so next I've got Basil Hoskins as number 14. He's been in like a lot of TV movies, it seemed like, but he was also in The Avengers and the New Avengers as well. He was in both of them. And then that was like all that I actually recognized. And it was just a bunch of like TV movies, it looked like.
Mm-hmm. Coming up next, we have Hilary Dwyer as number 73. That's how she's credited in the credits, although IMDb has her being listed as Hilary Heath. She was in Avengers. She was in Z-Cars. She was in Callan. Something called The Challengers. She was in Space 1999, so I guess we'll see her when we inevitably watch that.
I like to imagine The Challengers is just a hilarious ripoff of the Avengers. One of those low budget like ripoffs.
Lower budget. I mean, this is 60s British TV we're talking about. The original was probably made with, stick of gum in the paperclip you found in your pocket last week.
Yeah, I guess. Bringing back that joke we always used to make in classic Doctor Who era about the BBC having no budget.
Yeah, and on Zenith, a Blake 7 podcast, our completed Blake 7 podcast. Check that out.
I got one more. Norman Scase as the psychiatric director. Who has like 100 acting credits. That's the only reason why I wrote him down, because he wasn't really a big role in like this story, but he is a pretty big actor. He was in like the Doctors, Jack the Ripper, The Avengers, and those are like the big ones. Play of the week, play of the month, those usual things. He was in the 1965 Sherlock Holmes as well, and then that was pretty much everything I recognized him in. At least everything that I wrote down.
Mm-hmm. And because, at least I don't think we've covered him before, but Peter Swanwick as the supervisor, I can't remember if we covered the supervisor, but I want to say no.
I don't think we did.
Yeah, so now I think is a more opportune time than ever, because he had a slightly larger role to play in this episode in getting fired. But yeah, he's been in some Charlie Chan stuff. Yeah. He was in William Tell. He was in Danger Man, and guess what? He's our actor who died suspiciously close to the airing of the episode, because he died in 1968 at the age of 46, and Wikipedia talks about how he was involved in some undisclosed medical complications that led to his death. Yeah. Yep.
I'm just looking at his IMDb page now, and you remember when I was like, I can never recognize Danger Man sometimes, because sometimes it's credited as Secret Agent. Well, he's credited in both Danger Man and Secret Agent separately, which makes me wonder if they consider the like pre-break Danger Man, and the post-break Danger Man as Secret Agent on IMDb.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, that's a good point. I guess there's only one way to find out, and that's to check.
It's true, but this is Decorative Vegetable. You think we do research here?
Peter Swanwick looks way older than 45 or 46 or however old he was in this.
I think that's because he's bald.
Probably. But even
they
that,
might
I
also
don't know.
play it up. Maybe he's got some old age makeup on,
Maybe, yeah.
It definitely looks, by the way, like IMDb considers pre-62 Danger Man, and post-62 Danger Man a Secret Agent.
Huh. Guess now we know.
It's true, we know now. Top
And
series
knowing
in
is half the
cast.
battle. G.I. Joe.
Patrick McGowan's picture on IMDb is like...
It's him doing the Be Seen You thing, isn't it?
No. It's like a black and white publicity shot of him, but he looks like a hermit.
He kind of was, like, after this show aired and, like, even later on in his personal life. It's very reclusive.
Damn, Patrick. That's unfortunate. Well, yeah, so you wanted to talk about the twist on the quote about hammer into anvil.
Yeah, well, so I found this blog this week that I used as a source, and that I'll put in the show notes.
Is it my boy Pop Apostle?
No, it was, I can't even remember the name. Shoot. Oh, it was like junkyard.blog or something like that. And
yeah. I think I used them for Checkmate.
Yeah, they cover a lot of different stuff. I found them this week, and basically, like, everything I like is covered by that blog. They have the old British stuff. They cover a lot of anime as well. Just a lot of other stuff. And they even, one of their posts from a few days ago is a review / little mini write-up of the book that I'm currently reading. So it's like, man, what are the chances? Like, this blog basically covers everything I like and nothing I don't. So I definitely bookmarked them. But they had some insight onto where the quote comes from. So I'm just going to read that verbatim because they put it better than what I could paraphrase. So this is what they write. Even before I started watching this episode, the title gave me a clue as to what was going to happen. I don't want to say this name.
I think it's pronounced Geth.
Geth,
Goethe.
yeah, is referenced in the episode, but Orwell's subversion of the metaphor is key. Quote, in real life, it is always the anvil that breaks the hammer, never the other way about, end quote. That's from Politics in the English Language, and Orwell was writing about dying metaphors, one step removed from dead metaphors, which I wrote a whole study about once for a college course. Dead metaphors are fully integrated into the language to the extent that they are no longer recognized as metaphors, whereas dying metaphors are ones where the original context is misunderstood and have been twisted out of their original meaning. So Orwell identified the hammer and the anvil as being twisted to represent the anvil being broken by the hammer, whereas in reality it is the hammer that eventually breaks. In the context of the village, number 2 is the hammer and the prisoners are the anvil. This is the episode where number 6 finally has enough and turns the tables. The anvil breaks the hammer. So yeah, interesting insight there. I've actually read Politics in the English Language, but I completely forgot this quote and everything that it was about. So, yeah.
Well, now you know. Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting. I saw that quote too, but it was on my boy Pop Apostle.
Yeah, I should check out Pop Apostle, because you've been mentioning it every week, and I haven't actually looked at it.
I like his write-ups of the episodes, because he, like, covers a lot of the, like, obscure details that I always want to know about. Like, in this episode, he talks about all of the records on the record stand, and then he talks about how the one that number 6 chooses, what is it, La Lycienne Suite by Davier, is a real so he talks about how George Bizet, who is listed as composing it, actually did compose the music for La Lycienne, but the conductor listed on the version of the record that number 6 picks, this guy could not find any conductor by that name. Wow. So he surmises that perhaps the conductor was made up for this episode, but that, you know, everything else is true to real life, that Bizet actually did write the music for that play.
There's another similar thing that happens in this episode that is, yeah, just weird similar. When number 6 is going to give that, like, message to the person who's recording the messages, it's in Spanish, and it's a quote from Don Quixote.
Mm-hmm.
But number 6 mangles the quote, both in his accent and just that it's close to what's in the book, but it's not exactly a quote from Don Quixote. But then when the lady who is taking the messages records the message and says that, like, gives him the price, which is based on how many words it is, like, based on how many words, it is actually the quote from the book, exactly as it is.
Yeah. And also, like, yeah, I think Papa Apostle mentions that, but, like, the quote he says is only 8 words long, but the actual quote is 9 words long, and that is what she writes down.
Yeah. And the quote, the actual quote, translates to, there's more evil in the village than is heard about, or something. But number 6 has, like, a mangled version of that.
What's also nice about Pop Apostle is that they're those people who pause the screen and then transcribe the entire tally-ho article that appears on screen for 3 seconds. Security of the community. I actually noticed this in regards to that article. So the first line refers to number 2 as the new number 2, which means that he must have not been in office for very long before number 6 just takes him down.
Mm-hmm.
Which I thought was kind of an interesting... It was kind of an interesting thing to notice, because it adds another layer to the story, but isn't something that's, like, no attention is drawn to it at all. Like, it's just kind of a background thing that you could notice and would add to the story.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, other than that, I actually don't have much to talk about, except that I will say for the first time in a long time, I watched The Prisoner in, like, mid-afternoon instead of at 11 at night. And after watching this specific episode, I was like, you know, if I had watched this at 11 at night, I probably would have hated it. But as it stands, I just kind of found it a little boring. If only because, like, at 11 at night, I would have not wanted to pay attention at all. And, you know, would have probably not gotten anything out of this episode. And, as you know, there is some stuff to be gotten out of this episode, but I do think this is one of those episodes that's a little bit of a There's a little bit of a filler, but I think they have to. They had to do it.
Yeah,
Because
had to get up to that 17 episodes somehow, you know.
They had to get up to the 17 episodes, but I also feel like they had to have an episode where number 6 gets at least a win, like once, right? They had to throw that in there.
Yeah. Interact Zone and Midnight Only, our go-to sources, are actually kind of mixed on their reception to this episode. So Interact Zone calls it one of the worst, and weirdly enough, they put it down, or he puts it down, I guess, because it's just one guy. I've realized. I didn't actually, I wasn't actually cognizant of that. Maybe it was subconsciously, but I wasn't actually cognizant that Interact Zone was just one dude until we had a little conversation on Twitter. But anyway, Interact Zone writes that number 2's performance brings down this episode, which I can kind of see, but I didn't think that while watching it. And Midnight Only calls it one of the best episodes of The Prisoner and praises it.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on whether I kind of feel like it all depends on whether or not you want number 2 to succeed every week, you know? If you're really pulling for number 2, then this week is going to be like, oh, man, number 2, what are you doing, man? Come on, man. But if you're really pulling for number 6, then this week is like, oh, heck yeah, number 6, finally. About time that you took the gloves off.
Yeah. I think I put this sort of lower on the ladder of episodes in my estimation. I don't think it's one of my favorites.
I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites, but I don't think it's the worst episode of The Prisoner. But hey, to each their own.
Yeah, that sounds like it would be a title of a Prisoner episode. To each their own.
To each their own, yeah.
Yeah, and that's all I got.
Yeah, that's all I got too. All right, so we have an email this week, and then also, I believe, a comment on the website. So, from Steven, subject line, The Prisoner. I sent this via email because I worried that it would not arrive if I were to send it via the postal service. On one of your episodes, you said that there's probably no viewer who finishes The Prisoner episodes and thinks, that was weird, and there's no further thoughts. Well, that's pretty much how I react to them, actually. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Cheers, Steven. Well, Steven, thanks for reaching out and letting us know that we were dead wrong.
Yeah, thanks for plunging the knife in and twisting it. Yeah. Really?
Yeah, and that's it. Not much else to say there. And also, a nice dig at the postal service, who's still probably lost to that book I ordered from Amazon.co.uk. I'm 90% sure now it got lost in the postal service.
Yeah, well, also nice dig at our government who's
trying to kill the post service right now.
Yeah.
That's problematic. I don't know if I told the story on the podcast, but I was on the subreddit for South Africa the other day, and there was a thread about the South African postal service sucking when they deliver packages because they just throw them out the window.
Nice.
And one of the comments was the postal service is still running?
Yeah, you did mention that. I can't remember if it was on this podcast or on Trust Your Doctor.
And then the guy who's I ordered something online and it arrived 2 years later. Oh, South Africa.
Yeah, so we got some comments on Facebook this week, as we do every week, but I want to be more diligent on reading all the comments from Facebook, which is not something we ever promised to do, but is, I guess, now something we're doing. So this is a comment from our post on Dance of the Dead. So Boz says, good one this. A lot of people have this as the second episode in their running order. I'm not too sure because, if memory serves, she, I think referring to number 2, that is, makes a comment on democracy that implies that Free For All takes place before this. This actress was in Kinda, I think. Yeah, she was in Kinda.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah. We have another comment on the same episode. This one from Alex. It's 2020. If someone told me I was already dead and this is hell, I would be tempted to believe them. Keep chugging along, fellas. I'm loving this series. Incidentally, there's a Bolian barber on Star Trek The Next Generation called Mott. So every time you joke about number 6 being a barber, I am reminded of Mott the Barber. The ridiculous thing is there are enough super sneaky species like the Cardassians and the Romulans,
Yep.
who almost read that as Kardashians, by the way.
Yeah, don't we all?
And the Romulans, who would do this stuff to Mott the Barber if he suddenly resigned from Starfleet on the off chance that he knew something. I mean, people do talk to their barbers, so if the barber to a prominent leader among the enemy were to suddenly resign, it would make the enemy side curious. I could also see that if number 6 was the barber, and I told them some innocuous reason like, my wife is pregnant, so I wanted a job that would be less dangerous, then the village just wouldn't believe him. What if number 6 is terrified of letting them know he knows nothing important in case they decide to kill him?
Yeah, I mean, that was the comment I was thinking of with regards to the barber that I mentioned earlier. And, like, that's, like, a very real possibility, especially how in Checkmate, what's his number was like, you know, I told them everything. I literally sold out. And the worst part is they don't even believe me.
Right. Roland Walter Dutton.
Oh, that's right. It was Roland.
Yeah. Interesting thought there.
Yeah, I mean, what if he is just refusing to say because it's so innocuous he doesn't think they'll believe him, or they'll, like, laugh at him? What if he was a spy, but the reason he resigned was just like, I stubbed my toe one day and I didn't want to do it again, and it's just so embarrassing he doesn't want to tell them.
Yeah, what if he lost, like, a really embarrassing bet against his coworkers and didn't want to, like, follow through with it, so he resigned?
Yeah, I mean, what if? What if? We don't know. But thanks for reaching out, guys and gals. I don't think any gals reached out this week,
No.
but gotta be inclusive. Anyway, I don't have anything else to say about The Prisoner this week.
Yeah, neither do I.
So, if anyone would like to reach us, you can email us at thedoctor@decorativevegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on Hammer into Anvil. You can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable. You can find us on basically any podcast platform at Inevitable, a classic sci-fi podcast. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor, like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast, and follow us on Twitter. Next time we're going to be watching It's Your Funeral, but until then, the end.